Welcome back to Requiem Radio. With me today, I have a close friend and a special guest of us, Forever Risen 3. He is going to be discussing with us today Byzantine Catholicism, so I'm looking forward to getting in this conversation. But I'll go ahead and pass the mic over to him to do a further introduction. Thanks for being on the show.
So, hey guys, I am Forever Risen, and of course that's not my real name, but I would stay anonymous for this interview for the sake of, because we're going to get into a lot of different topics, and I hope I don't offend anyone. But yeah, I'm looking forward to just give you guys a little expose of the rich liturgical and spiritual tradition that I am a part of. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. And for people who don't know, this is our first episode on Requiem Radio where we're actually recording in person. So if it sounds a bit different, that's the reason why. But I hope you guys enjoy. So the first question I have prepared really is for mainly the audience at large. Could you briefly explain what Byzantine Catholicism is?
Yes. So the Byzantine Catholics are various churches within the Catholic Church, which, the very meaning of the word Catholic means universal, which, so by its definition, it incorporates universal or different elements and traditions and rites within the universal church. We are, just a group of many groups within the Catholic Church. We are united by our liturgical rite, which is a tradition largely derived from, and I guess sort of faithful to the traditions of Byzantium, which, you can kind of equate that with the area around today's Istanbul, Turkey, which, some people might call Constantinople. But yeah, we are a rite, and under us, there are many different churches that all prescribe or subscribe to the same rite, the Byzantine rite. I belong to one of these churches in particular, which is the Ruthenian Catholic Church in the United States. We have our own traditions as well, on top of our liturgical tradition of being Byzantine or Greek. We are from, not me personally, I am not culturally or ethnically related to the Ruthenians or the Rusenes whatsoever, but the people of my church originally came from today's Western Ukraine, Eastern Slovakia, Northern Hungary, and perhaps even a bit in Romania and Czech Republic. But yeah, I could go on and on about this, but this is a brief introduction.
Definitely. And I could already tell you're very knowledgeable on this subject, and me and you have had this conversation numerous times before. But something for the audience, especially a lot of our Catholic lay people, is that they're unfamiliar with what Byzantine Catholicism is. There's plenty of them who go about their whole lives thinking they're just a Roman Catholic Church. Could you go into and describe what is the main difference between Byzantine Catholicism towards Roman Catholicism for people who want to know?
Right. So the differences are numerous, but I would say, right off the bat, you're going to, if you ever attend a Byzantine Catholic Church, you're going to notice there's a significant difference in the way our churches look. We're not going to have, most of the times, kneelers. Our churches are going to have a bunch of icons, but very few statues. And these icons look like Orthodox icons. Our priests wear different vestments. Our deacons wear different vestments. You might even see the priest with his wife and kids, which is certainly not a common sight to witness in a Roman Catholic Church. You're going to perhaps not see a lot of people holding on to a rosary. You're going to notice our liturgy or our Mass is completely different from a Mass that you're used to. People most of the times do not kneel during the Mass, or as we call it, the Divine Liturgy. We have a completely different worship setting than what most Catholics are used to. And by the virtue of the demographics of the Catholic Church as a whole, most Catholics are Roman Rite or Latin Rite Catholics. So it is understandable that perhaps many of you haven't heard of who we are. But yes, I would say one of the, if not the biggest difference between us is really in just the way we look. We do not look the same by any means.
And a quick question on that for people who may not be as well informed. The Byzantine Rite are in full communion with Rome, correct?
Yes. Yes. By all means, we are just as Catholic as everyone else. We are allowed to and welcome to partake in a Latin Roman Catholic Church, just as Latin Roman Catholics are welcome to and invited to partake at our churches.
Okay, because a lot of Catholics I've spoken to, because myself included, used to routinely go to two different parishes, one being a standard, Roman Catholic parish, the other being a Melkite one, and I was always asked the question, would you have to go through any separate preparations to go to these, or can I, as a Roman Catholic, simply just walk in and partake in communion, Holy Eucharist, and vice versa? So I'm glad you were able to clear a lot of that up. But one more question I'd like to ask on the Byzantine Rite before we move on a little bit further, but are you familiar with how many different Byzantine rites are there? Because I've had people ask me questions about that before.
So there's only one Byzantine Rite. There are multiple other rites on top of the Byzantine Rite and the Latin Rite, which is where most people belong. I can't really recall them on the top of my head. I believe let me try. There's the East Syriac Rite. There's the West Syriac Rite. They both are under the Antiochian Rite family. There's the Alexandrian Rite, I believe, and then under the Alexandrian Rite, you have the Coptic Rite and the Ge'ez Rite. And then there is the Armenian Rite, and then there are not a lot of them, but a few of them out there. In fact, there are even sub-rites within the Roman Rite, like the Ambrosian Rite or the Dominican Rite, the Carmelite Rite. We can go on and on about this, but there's only one rite for us Byzantine Catholics, and that is the Byzantine Rite. But within the Byzantine Rite, there are multiple churches, self-governing, autonomous sui juris churches. And I'm actually not exactly sure the exact amount of churches under the Byzantine Rite, because many of them are very, very small. We're talking less than a couple thousand people. But really, the main ones we have in the United States are the Ukrainian Catholic Church, the Ruthenian Catholic Church, otherwise known as just the Byzantine Catholic Church, and then the Melkite Catholic Church, and then maybe perhaps you could every once in a while find a Romanian Catholic Church. But other than these four, you really won't find many other Byzantine Catholic churches per se. There are two Russian Greek Catholic churches that are Byzantine Rite in the United States, but there are so few of them. I'm not trying to say disregard them, but you're not going to bump into them.
Okay, thank you for that very much. And now that we discussed a lot about the Byzantine Rite, I want to go more into the historical and liturgical side of things. So my first question I have for you on this issue is, what are the historical origins of the Byzantine Catholicism? Because did they come out of nowhere? Did something happen? Can you elaborate on that for the audience?
Well, so all Byzantine Catholics at one point were Eastern, well, I guess you could say Eastern Orthodox. Now, all Eastern Orthodox at one point, I guess you could say, were were just Catholics, not Roman Catholics, but Catholics. AKA, prior to the Great Schism of the 11th century, us, meaning Catholics, and the Eastern Orthodox were of one church in one communion. And within that communion, we had many different practices, rites. And the major two within that communion were, the Latin Rite and the Byzantine Rite. So the Byzantine Catholics trace our origin all the way back to the times prior to the Great Schism, when the Byzantines, the Greeks, center around Byzantium, or today's Turkey, the Eastern Roman Empire, practiced and worshipped differently of their religion, which is of the same religion as the people of the West. And we unfortunately left communion with Rome at the Great Schism, but eventually came back into communion with Rome a couple hundreds of years later. But really, if we were to trace our origin all the way back then, we originated from the Apostle Andrew. Just like you could argue the Roman tradition originated from the Apostle Paul and the Apostle and Peter. Just as we just very recently celebrated Saints Peter and Paul Day solemnity.
Okay, and you mentioned the Great Schism. How much of an impact did that hold to the Byzantine Catholic Church when it was first occurred? Did people at the time know there was a schism, or was it a gradual thing, or was it almost abrupt where a lot of people left at once?
It's kind of a both thing, right? So first of all, an important distinction to make is perhaps mine is one particular Byzantine Catholic Church, and I'm not even actually too sure about this, but I've heard something along the line of the Italo-Albanian Byzantine Catholic Church never left communion with Rome. But for the vast majority, if not all of us meaning Byzantine Catholics, at the time of the Great Schism, we left Rome. We were Orthodox. We were Eastern Orthodox. It was only a couple hundreds of years later we came back into communion with Rome and resubmitted ourselves to Rome's authority. However, the Great Schism was of significant impact on our tradition insofar as it really left a bitter taste in the mouths of both the Catholics, the Roman Catholics, and the Eastern Orthodox. It was not more or less a very sudden thing. It wasn't just like the Pope woke up one day and decided to excommunicate the Patriarch of Constantinople. It was really a gradual sort of drifting apart between the West and the East over political differences, difference in theological development, you could argue, difference in the understanding of ecclesiology, and just all of things boiled over at that precise point. I think in the year 1054 or 1058. I think it's 1054. But it wasn't like a clean break either, because as far as I know, the Patriarchate of Alexandria, which eventually came into communion with what today will be known as the Eastern Orthodox churches, was still in communion with Rome somewhere around 200 years after the Great Schism. And many laity did not really care about the schism per se for a while, and people were communing each other regardless, until eventually things became more and more clear that these two churches, the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church, are no longer in communion. Fun fact, technically Rome and Russia, or the Russian Orthodox Church, never officially excommunicated each other. The communion just kind of faded away, per se.
And another historical question that I'm curious about, I've heard this before and I want to see this confirmation by you, but is it true that gradually over the next going couple of decades and even centuries, it's been a process where a lot of Byzantine Catholics are coming back into communion of Rome? And my second question for you is, do you know the most recent Byzantine Catholic group that were added on that list to come back into communion of Rome?
I wouldn't say that, to be honest, per se. Yes, various Byzantine Catholic churches who were Orthodox came back into communion with Rome over the span of hundreds of years, but it hasn't really happened very recently. It kind of just stopped around, I would say. I actually am not too sure about this because, once again, many of the Byzantine Catholic churches like the Belarusian Greek Catholic Church or the Italo-Albanian Greek Catholic Church, are not very big in terms of numbers. So I really am not that familiar with their history. But no, I don't believe a significant amount of Byzantine Catholics have come back into communion with Rome from being Orthodox very recently. It more or less just kind of stopped around the beginning of 18th to the end of 18th century. The last major Byzantine Catholic Church that came back to Rome would be the Melkite Greek Catholic Church. And I believe that happened around the beginning of the 18th century. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. And another question on that I was curious about for you was, for you in particular, what was your walk to the Catholic faith and church? Did you first go Roman Catholic and then become Byzantine Catholic, or how did that work out for you?
So I was I grew up in a half agnostic, half Buddhist family. I'm Chinese ethnically speaking. My parents are Buddhist. But they sent me to a Christian school, and I converted to Lutheranism while I was at school when I was a kid, and I thought it was cool to be a Christian, or because I have to like go to chapel every day. After the fourth class in the morning, I might as well, do it, right? Maybe I was just a kid and dumb, but somehow I found God that way. But then, towards the end of high school, I kind of became a nominal Christian. I didn't really care about my faith anymore, and I was more or less becoming agnostic. But then in college, I sort of had this reversion towards Christ, and I decided that I should take my faith more seriously. And the only people who really spoke to me and encouraged me to come back to God were the campus Catholics. And I made a few friends there. And the closest friends of mine that I made from the Newman Center where the campus Catholics were, happened to be Eastern Catholics, Ruthenian Catholics. So they brought me into the church directly through Byzantine Catholicism. I actually was never Roman, which certainly an interesting perspective. You really don't see a lot of people like me in the United States. Most Byzantine Catholics here either were Roman Catholic at one point, or I guess you could say cradle Byzantine Catholics. They were not converts.
And a question that I've been asked before, me personally, I'm not sure if you were asked this as well, but when people learned that I was attending a Byzantine Rite service, they would always ask me, why Byzantine Rite? Why not just go Eastern Orthodox, for example, or Coptic Orthodox, or any of the other like Eastern religious traditions? What would your response be to those people?
Oh, just like any Catholic respond to them, right? Which is, upon this rock you shall build my church, and the gates of Hades will not triumph over it. The way we as Catholics look at that verse, the way we look at the key to the kingdom, the authority to bound and loose, and forgive and not forgive, is an authority that ultimately traces itself back to Peter and Peter alone. This is not to say that the other apostles were not given the authority. They obviously were as well. But the way we Byzantine Catholics understand the primacy of Rome and the supremacy of the Bishop of Rome is the same as every other Catholics, if not more, because this is really something that makes us stay Byzantine Catholics and not Eastern Orthodox or Coptic Orthodox or Assyrian Church of the East or any of other apostolic traditions, even though us and the Eastern Orthodox brothers have very similar spirituality, perhaps even in beliefs sometimes, if I may be frank. We do not see and understand authority similarly. We are 100% obedient to the Supreme Pontiff, who happens to be the successor of Peter and Peter alone.
Definitely. Really good answer, too, that I really enjoyed. Speaking of that, I'd like to now transition a bit more into some theologically based questions. My first one would be, what are some of the key theological differences between the Byzantine Catholics and other Christian traditions that you could think of?
Well, this really depends on how you sort of define the idea of theology, because we must as Catholics affirm this position, which is as Byzantine Catholics, which ultimately we are Catholics, that our faith, our theology is not substantially different from that of Latin Catholics or Armenian Catholics or Coptic Catholics, whatever you name it, even though we might be of different traditions in terms of theology, spirituality, and liturgical, stuff. We have the same theology per se, insofar as the underlying essence and substance of our theologies are exactly the same. However, I want to read this particular quote from, let's see, who wrote this? Pope Leo the 13th. Well, actually, no, not Pope Leo the 13th, but in Second Vatican Council, Vatican II's Decree Orientalium Ecclesiarum, where it says, actually, you know what? Forgive me. It wasn't Orientalium. It's Unitatis Redintegratio. I guess that's how you pronounce it. But anyway, it basically says this: in the study of Revelation, East and West have followed different methods and have developed differently their understanding and confession of God's truth. It is hardly surprising, then, if from time to time one tradition has come nearer to a full appreciation of some aspects of a mystery of revelation than the other, or has expressed it to better advantage. In such cases, these various theological expressions are to be considered often as mutually complementary rather than conflicting. So, substantially, yes, we have the same theology and same truth, but expressively, we perhaps focus on different things a bit more. The Eastern tradition focuses on our particular really strand of divinification or divinization, which we call theosis, which we attempt to achieve a lot through meditative prayer. Of course, other things as well, but meditative prayer is a very important part of it. Catechism, which actually, sorry, that's not how you pronounce that word. I just call it meditative prayer of the Desert Fathers because the word is a bit too complicated, honestly, for me to even pronounce.
It's all good. There's tons of church words that are like that.
yeah. Catechism, I believe, is the word. Let me just double check. Yep. Hesychasm. Oh my goodness. Hesychasm is a contemplative monastic tradition in the Eastern Christian traditions of the Eastern Catholic churches and Eastern Orthodox churches, in which stillness is sought through uninterrupted Jesus prayer. This is a very important prayer tradition of our tradition that we employ to achieve a higher degree of theosis, which you can roughly understand as deification or divinization, but it's a bit different. It certainly really is, and we also focus a lot on the healing aspect of God, the fallen short of perfection, part of the nature of sin, and I can go on and on about this. But really, the bottom line is we have the same theology substantially, only expressively that they differ in their theological expressions per se.
Okay. And a question I personally have, because I'm sure we're all familiar with the filioque debate. Do Byzantine Catholics, what is their understanding of the Trinity? Do they view it the same way with how the church does it, or do some of them view it differently?
I'm going to say this. We are obligated as Byzantine Catholics and any Catholics to hold to the faith insofar as we are obligated to believe in the dogmas of the church and the doctrine of the church. And the doctrine of the church regarding the nature of the Trinity especially pertaining to the entire controversy around the filioque, which was, obviously a big deal that didn't just almost, that was kind of the immediate cause that caused the schism per se. I don't think that's the only cause, but you get what I mean.
Yeah.
Yes, we need to believe in the filioque if the filioque is defined strictly according to the Council of Florence, where in it says the Latins say that the Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son, whereas the Greeks say the Spirit proceeds from the Father through the Son. But in reality, they're saying the same thing, and they simply do not wish to understand each other. The Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son in one principle, one spiration, and the Spirit receives his, I believe, subsistent being from both the Father and the Son. However, we also have to emphasize that the Father is the single origin of all divinity. I mean, all these words people can go on and on, but I've basically arrived at the conclusion: yes, even though we do not say filioque in our creed, because the creed originally never included the filioque, does not mean we do not believe in the filioque. Insofar as we hold to the definition of the procession of the Holy Spirit as defined by the Council of Florence, which is an infallible decree and dogma.
And for people who aren't familiar with the significance of the Council of Florence, can you briefly elaborate what that is?
So the Council of Florence is this council that happened in the 15th century, mid 15th century, where the Catholics and the Orthodox attempted to reunite with each other. It ultimately sort of succeeded, but for only maybe 2 years, and then it went down as a major failure. Didn't actually work. However, at that council, many sort of compromises, or not compromises, but I guess you could say dialogue and attempts at unity were tried, and a lot of things were clarified, and one of them was the filioque. This particular explanation and expression of the filioque was something that the East and the West were able to agree on roughly around 400 years after the schism. So it is a very significant council by all means, because many, what nowadays you would know as Eastern Orthodox bishops attended the council and signed on to it. Only later on to be, to renounce their signatures and whatnot. But it is something that resembles perhaps the most earnest and the closest we've gotten at a genuine reunion between the two churches for the post the Great Schism.
Okay, thank you for that very much. And one more question I want to ask about theology, then we can move on to a different topic. But could you explain the significance of icons in Byzantine Catholic worship? Because that is something that, like you stated earlier, you don't have statues like the Romans do, but it is a very beautiful and significant part of your guys' liturgy and of even, I dare say, the culture. Would you want to go into detail of some of that and what the significance is?
So icons have always been a part of our tradition. They're sort of seen as something even above the traditional Latin understanding of what you would call sacred art. Icons for us are spiritual doors to the different realm, spiritual doors to heaven per se. No, we do not worship icons. I'm sure everyone, no matter what kind of apostolic tradition you belong to, you've probably been called some sort of names by Protestants for venerating statues, icons, well, you name it, right? But it is especially bad. This type of standard is especially bad for us because we frequently venerate our icons. If you go to an Eastern Catholic church, you'll see people kissing the icons everywhere, bowing down in front of them. Just it could really look like people are worshiping these images and wood, but we are not, right? Because we see the icon not as icons per se, rather that they are doors and gateways for us to get a glimpse of the logos of the message, as well as the underlying reality of what heaven is kind of like for us, or what, the perfect life of Christ is kind of like to us. And we believe when we venerate these icons, when we kiss them, when we bow in front of them, we're not bowing to these icons just in terms of bowing to a graven image, or something we made with our hands. Rather, that we're bowing to what they represent, which will be the saints and God and the angels, and you can go on and on about it.
Definitely. And that's something I found very beautiful every time I attend the Melkite services. A question I want to ask you along the lines, though, if we're going to change the beat up a little bit, would be, how would Byzantine Catholicism respond to modernity or modern times compared to how the Romans would? Do you guys approach the issue or topic of sin differently or modernity differently? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Regarding modernism, I think we've kind of arrived at the conclusion as Byzantine Catholics, the best way to respond to modernity, which we largely view as mostly negative, unfortunately. Of course, modernity has positive influences. It provided us, medicine and cars, stuff like that, which are great stuff. But when it comes to the spiritual aspect of modern society, it's been mostly bad. And I think we as Byzantine Catholics have somewhat arrived at the conclusion that is, we hold fast to our tradition. We hold fast to orthodoxy. We hold fast to what has been passed down onto us for generations and generations. And because these things have stood the test of time. They've proven to be a reliable tool against the evil temptations of running away from God and embracing the material world. At our liturgy, we say, cast away all our earthly cares. In our cherubic hymn, that's a part of the hymn that we sing during our liturgy, every liturgy of the Divine Liturgy of St. John Chrysostom, which is what we use mostly. Yes. So this approach, I dare to say, perhaps right, it's the same view many Latin Rite Catholics hold as well, but certainly not all of you. There are factions within a significant amount of Roman Catholics that perhaps do not think this way and wish to modernize the church by, I guess, introducing new elements into the liturgy, into catechesis, into ecclesiastical hierarchy, and the list goes on and on. I hesitate to call them modernists because I don't want to be accusing anyone of heresy, but no. But within our tradition, we've largely come to the agreement that no, we are going to hold fast to what we've always had.
Beautifully said. And a follow-up question for that I'd like to know is, what are some of the current challenges facing the Byzantine Catholic Church today?
Well, numbers, right? People are becoming less religious overall, especially in Western nations. So we're losing people from our churches. We don't have enough priests. It's the same thing that kind of everyone faces, except it's even worse for us because we are already a quite small community. Every person we lose, every family we lose, is a huge blow to us. Perhaps you could say that the Latin Catholic Church, if it loses maybe a couple families, it's still sad, but it's not going to significantly impact the church. But it could do that to many of the Byzantine Catholic churches. And another thing is, especially in America, I can only speak about this in the context, the American context, because I'm here. I don't know what's going on really outside of this country. But many of our Catholic population in America is made up of Hispanic immigrants, if we can be honest with each other, and their children. Hispanic immigrants and their children are not Eastern Catholics most of the times, right? And that's totally okay, and that's great because the tradition that have been passed down to them from generations ago of their ancestors are Roman Catholicism, largely, as Roman as you can get, basically. So even though uh, the Catholicism is not officially growing in America, it's projected to stay about 1/5, or I believe a quarter. I don't know exactly, around between 1/5 and a quarter of U.S. population for the foreseeable future for coming decades, because of how many immigrants we're getting that are Catholics and their children. Um, it's not the case for us Eastern Catholics. We we're not we're not getting a bunch of people from the old country, and a lot of old people are dying out, and their children are not coming to church, and that's the reason why we should evangelize. But that presents its own challenges. But I can get into that if you want. But
that was going to be a question I'm curious to ask you. How does the Byzantine Catholic Rite respond to evangelization? Do you guys go out often? Do you try to promote more and get people to fill up your churches? Or is it more a privated community? How would you see that? And would you be comfortable enough to actually encourage and tell people of the Roman Rite, hey, you should come over to the East or Byzantine Rite?
Right. This is a very sensitive topic because I do not consider trying to get Roman Rite Catholics to join the Latin Rite Catholics to join a Eastern Catholic Church a form of evangelism. Because what are you evangelizing? It's the same faith. These people are already Catholics. They have all the sacraments, valid and licit sacraments, of the one church that we all belong to. They do not need to be evangelized. If anything, we should encourage them to not come to our churches because they have a duty to the rite they belong to. And nowhere in the world where we're just having so many Catholics that we don't have enough churches to fit all these Catholics in. So we have to send them, away from Latin churches and put them into Eastern churches because all the Latin churches are full. That's not happening, not in the year of 2024. So I consider it a bit unethical to steal Roman Catholics away from their, canonical church and try to get them to become us. So really, it leaves the pool of potential people to be evangelized to be Protestants and atheists, and other religions.
And going a step further, if I may interrupt really quick, would you be okay evangelizing for, let's say, Eastern Orthodox or any of those guys further to the east, like Rokor, or any of the groups involved, like Greek Orthodox?
No, actually, no. And the reason why is because, like I said earlier in this podcast, I was saying, how did we Byzantine Catholics become Byzantine Catholics? We became Byzantine Catholics because our bishops decided that they're going to leave the Orthodox churches and join communion with Rome unilaterally. So they left Orthodoxy to become Catholic, which is the right move by all means, because the Catholic Church is the true church. It's the I'm not going to pull the Nicene Creed on you, but you get what I'm trying to say. But but this method of trying to unite the East and the West have been officially deemed to be ineffective and acrimonious, to say the least. The idea that we're going to go out there and try to fish maybe 3, 5, 6, 7, or even 20 Eastern Orthodox bishops or laity into becoming us, only to further instigate more division and more hatred between us and the Eastern Orthodox, is no longer popular, and it's in fact officially discouraged. What we would really ideally like to see is the entire East and the entire West coming together. And if us stealing maybe 20 or 30 of them would make this significantly harder and impede this process of church level ecumenism, then we'd rather not do that. So yes, the historical practice of uniatism is no longer encouraged. And me, as a quote uniat, would agree to that. Which is why, again, our pool is sort of left to Protestants and atheists and agnostic and, people of other religion.
And a quick question I have for you, and this is a common misconception that I think would be more appropriate if you're able to address. But a lot of people coming in and visiting from even, let's say, Protestants, because I did at a time bring a Protestant friend to one of these, is he noticed that a lot of people attending in laity in the church were primarily of the same ethnic background. And he asked me, do a lot of these Byzantine rite services primarily cater to a certain ethnic group only? And I believe that's a heresy called, you can correct me on this, but ethnopilotism.
Pilotism, yeah.
Would you be kind enough to elaborate more on that and explain why it isn't an issue?
So technically, ethnophilitism is not per se a heresy. It is a heresy to Orthodox, but not a heresy to Catholics per se. Once again, we have not officially anathematized philitism as a heresy as the Greeks, the Orthodox, did. However, it is definitely a heresy. Let me just put it this way: the church is supposed to, not just supposed to, implore to welcome everyone, regardless of their ethnic and racial whatever origin. However, it is the case that many Byzantine Catholics, because of our long history and relative small numbers, are sort of bound together, not just by our liturgical tradition and our, theological traditions, but an ethnic tradition. So because of this, if you go to a Melkite church, you're going to see a bunch of Arabs. And if you go to a Ukrainian Catholic church, you're going to see a bunch of Ukrainians. But officially speaking, that church is open to everyone. And that church should be wanting to get everyone in, as many people in as they can. To preserve your ethnic origin and your ethnic pride is okay and not necessarily heretical. It only becomes a problem when this promotion and this sort of preservation of your national identity becomes a hindrance to efforts of evangelism and being open and welcome to everyone else.
So a lot of it has to do with more intentionality then, where it's not per se wrong if, like you said, people just over time have a certain group of people culture to stick together. But it'd be another thing if they were being exclusivist and not evangelizing or not wanting anyone in who aren't of their same culture or like group.
Yes.
Their in group. Okay. That makes a lot more sense. Thank you for that. We're going to go on our quick break right now, and we're going to have a ad coming through. We will be back with you guys shortly. Hello, everyone. Thank you for listening to Requiem Radio. Black Monk Rosaries. Black Monk Rosaries are truly something that stand the test of time. They honor the tradition of St. Dominic by using only the finest materials and craftsmanships. Black Monk rosaries, bracelets, medals, chains, and keychains come with a lifetime warranty to it. If anything breaks, they'll replace it, no questions asked. Crafted from high-impact acrylic beads, corrosion-resistant stainless steels, and industrial-grade paracord, Black Monk rosaries are built to be the strongest in the world. Each piece is handmade with attention to detail and inspected 3 times to ensure top quality. Experience the durability and elegance of Black Monk rosaries, strong enough to be worn proudly in your faith. Visit Black Monk Rosaries today. Okay, we are back right now and we're live, back on air. So I'm glad we covered a lot of ground so far talking about the Byzantine Catholics. And I want to move more into a deeper theological or philosophical lens of this. And my first question for you would be, how does Byzantine Catholic theology address a lot of contemporary ethical issues that we see today? Is there anything you'd like to comment on that, whether it be them responding to modern ideas such as like communism or fascism or certain like philosophical ideas like objectivism? Mm-hmm. Do they regularly put out I don't know if it would be equivalent of a synod, but something to like address these things?
Actually, I don't think so, to be honest. For example, I myself follow the moral theology of St. Thomas Aquinas quite closely. and I'm very comfortable in doing that. I'm a full supporter of the double effect theory when it comes to when is it permissible to use like is it permissible to pull the lever if the train is about to run over 50 people versus you pulling the lever and just runs over one? That type of stuff, I just look into Aquinas' moral theology and I go, okay, if he thinks that's cool, then I think it's cool. No, we don't really per se have like our own strain of school to deal with modernism, but you could just say that we are more or less excuse me, the Coke. I keep burping, but basically, yeah, we're just more or less on the conservative side of all Catholics when it comes to LGBTQ, contraception, divorce. I mean, abortion, you name it.
That was going to be a question I wanted to ask to you as well, and along that line, could you elaborate more or share why Byzantine Rite priests are allowed to be married and how that works? Because a very common thing is, okay, Byzantine Rites claim that they are in full communion with Rome. They're valid, they're listed. But Roman Rite priests aren't allowed to get married. How come you guys are allowed to have married priests? Do you want to comment on that?
Oh, yeah. So, first of all, actually, there are more married Roman Rite priests than Byzantine Rite priests. I know this is insane to believe. Of course, this is not to speak in percentage, obviously. But if we speak of sheer amount, by just pure numbers, there are way more married Roman Rite, Latin Rite priests than Byzantine Rite priests. We're talking all the Anglican Ordinaria priests. We're talking, all the ones that got a dispensation. Usually it's 2 per diocese, and not any more than 2. But anyway, so priestly celibacy has always been a disciplinary sort of restraint or requirement that has been adopted by the Latin Church, I think somewhere around the 12th century. Officially, I mean, it was a developing practice prior to that as well. But no, priests were never required to be celibate in the early church, and it still isn't. And it's simply the case that the tradition of the East has never really gone towards priestly celibacy. And I can see the argument for it being a more beneficial and superior form of priesthood. And I'm not going to even argue against that. But I will say is, even if you personally hold the opinion that a celibate priest is a better priest than a married priest, it doesn't mean that we can't have married priests. And since it's always worked, why stop it is what I'm trying to say. It's always been a part of our tradition. I think there were specific reasons behind the institution of priesthood celibacy sometime back in the 12th century, 11th century with the Latin Church. Those reasons, I personally hold the opinion, did not exist in the Eastern Church. And frankly speaking, every time celibacy has been pushed onto us, it just causes division and split and schism and pain. It has done us way worse, way more harm than good. Whenever people try to force priestly celibacy on us.
Okay, that's a very good answer. And along that line, I would like to ask more of a cultural question, but how diverse would you say the cultures between the different groups within the Byzantine Rite are? Are they primarily just Eastern, or is there a lot more difference there? If I were to, let's say, walk into Ruthenian church without knowing that, and then walk to, I don't know, a Melkite church without knowing either or of them, I just thought they're both Byzantine Rite. Would there be a clear distinction where you feel like, whoa, this is a different one, or how would you answer that?
Certainly, you will see different architectural style. There would be minor distinctions between the way they do their divine liturgy, with sometimes the use of languages that are more prevalent among the specific ethnic group that makes up a particular church. you will notice people look different. Like, let's just be honest. If you go to Ukrainian church, you're going to see a bunch of blonde people that look like they're East Slavs. You go to a Melkite church, you're going to look at a bunch of Arabs. That's just the way it is, right? Yeah, and ethnicity plays still a very important role in Byzantine Catholic churches, perhaps with the exception of the Ruthenian Catholic Church, because the Ruthenian Catholic Church in the recent years has engaged on a conscious effort to I guess what's the word to sort of diversify itself, not in the sense of, let's get all diverse and, we need like a quota for the amount of minorities at church. That's not the way it is, right? But the Ruthenians have come to the realization that their ethnic reservoir is being drawn out. That many ethnic Ruthenians aren't staying Byzantine Catholic. They become Roman Catholic because of marriage or simply out of convenience. Many of them are just not even Christian anymore. So they've decided that they're going to stop calling themselves the Ruthenian Catholic Church and officially call themselves the Byzantine Catholic Church, in an effort to basically be like, okay, you know what? Like, we used to be a very ethnic church, but now we're going to try to be less ethnic. Let's use more English. Let's, just welcome and deliberately attract everyone of all ethnic backgrounds.
Okay, thank you. And a question I wanted to pivot over more to spiritual practices. What personal spiritual practices do you find most meaningful within the Byzantine Rite tradition?
Certainly. I mean, it's got to be the Jesus prayer, right? I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer. People make fun of it, but it is actually true. We pray the Jesus prayer a lot in a contemplative way, actually meditative way, where we just recite the same prayer, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner, over and over and over again. Sort of meditate on the precise meaning behind these words, which, though short, is a very important, very sort of meaningful phrase. Lord Jesus Christ symbolizes the divinity of Jesus. Son of God, symbolizes his hypostasis. Have mercy on me, is a call for him to come and heal us and forgive us at the same time. A sinner is a recognition of our own fallen nature. These sort of transcendent themes of that are incorporated into this prayer. Such a short prayer, but so powerful and beautiful. We recite it over and over and over again to sort of really grasp the meaning behind it. And yeah, that's basically the prayer that we do. Of course, we have other prayers in terms of our tradition, like a bunch of akathis dedicated to different saints and Mary and whatnot. But my favorite is definitely the Jesus prayer.
Beautifully said. And a question I want to move in from that as well is, along with your spiritual practice, do you also incorporate the use of icons or other devotional means into your daily routine?
Yes, I have lots of icons in my room. I'll usually kiss the icon of the Theotokos, which, by the way, just means God bearer, which is the title for Mary, as she is the bearer of God, mother of God. Theotokos is just that in Greek. So it's an icon of the Theotokos holding Christ as a child. I'll venerate that icon. I mean kiss it and sort of pay my homage to what it represents to Mary and Christ before I leave my room. Every time before I go to work, I'll pray the akathis to the Theotokos, joy of all who sorrow. Well, I'll pray that to Mary in front of an icon of her. Yeah, icons are kind of like images that aid in our prayer, because once again, like I said earlier, they're kind of like a glimpse of the heavenly and the divine.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's very beautiful. Now, I'd like to ask you more of a personal question along with the faith. But how do you balance your faith with your personal and professional life, or even what you do on a day-to-day basis? Do you wear certain Christian vestments at all? Do you have anything that you do that will make you stand out from like a crowd of people? What do you usually do by that?
Not really. Maybe every once in a while I'll wear a crucifix or, a 3-bar cross, a Slavic cross. I'll wear maybe a bracelet of beads that I can use to pray the Jesus prayer, but it really doesn't make me stand out too much. But I do say my table prayer, my meal prayers. I try to pray consistently and constantly, to pray without ceasing. But I don't really like to stand out. I'm not one of those guys who like to wear a huge cross. I also
every Hispanic ever just wearing an absurdly large cross.
Yeah. I'm not one of the Hispanics like Sola here who likes to wear a rosary. Yeah, but I appear rather normal and blended in with others at work. But that is not to say I don't pray, I don't think about God, I don't keep God in mind, I do things for Him while I'm at work.
Okay, beautifully said. And something I want to know, a few more questions and we'll go over to Q&A. But has there been any significant figure in your life that was interfaith or ecumenical in the sense that they were not Byzantine, right? Or even if they're not Catholic, that has inspired you to dig deeper into faith or ponder over certain questions?
I had an Eastern Orthodox roommate while I was in college who actually got me, at that moment I was a nominal Christian. He actually got me thinking about, him on top of, the campus Catholic people, the Newman Center people, really got me, contemplating and pondering about God and meaning of life, all of these big questions. Even though he himself was going through a faith crisis and was struggling, he was, living in a sinful relationship, fornicating with his girlfriend at the time, and struggling with his faith. But even though he himself was struggling, he would still like try and help me. And it's not in a hypocritical way. It's not like, this guy is out here having sex with his girlfriend, but then he's like telling me, bro, why don't you believe in God? And, like, you're going to go to hell. He's not like that. He's more so saying that I am a great sinner. You are too. And for both of us, the only way that we can get out of this mess that we found ourselves in is to rely on God and call for His help consistently and with faith, with hope. Yeah, I truly appreciated him. He really brought me close to the faith and to God.
That's beautiful to hear. And I'm curious from your personal opinion, but what role do you believe Byzantine Catholicism can play in promoting unity among different Christian traditions?
Well, according to, let's see, I wanted to quote a particular pope on this. Yes. Basically, Orientalium Ecclesiarum, that decree that was published in Vatican II demanded that Eastern Catholics must promote unity with other Christians, Eastern Christians especially. Among other things, specifically religious fidelity to the ancient Eastern traditions. And this was reiterated by the Congregation for the Oriental Churches in 1996 in their instruction called Il Padre Incomprensibile, where it says, quote, "In every effort of liturgical renewal, therefore, the practice of the Orthodox brethren should be taken into account, knowing it, respecting it, and, very importantly here, distancing from it as little as possible so as not to increase the existing separation." So our unity, our role, I guess, in this grandeur project of Christian unity or ecumenism, but not Iranianism, good ecumenism, is really by showing people to the East that despite of the fact that we are in communion with Rome, despite of the fact that we are unimpeded in our prayer, in our participation, whatever, with the entire Catholic Church, we are still able to really hold on to our tradition and not be discriminated by it, and to showcase it to our brothers and sisters in Christ from other traditions. And so that when others perhaps in the future feel like it's time for them to come back into communion with Rome, they could understand that just because you acknowledge Rome does not mean that an automatic erasure of your tradition and spirituality, things that you care about, you know?
That's really beautifully said. Thank you. And I was curious for you, are there any, I know you already mentioned the specific prayers, but would you say there's any other hymns or spiritual readings within the Byzantine tradition that has personally inspired you more?
Yes, you could look up this book called 100 Questions for Eastern Catholics. It should be on Amazon. It's written by one of our deacons way back then. It explains a lot of, is it 60 questions or 100 questions? It's been a while since I read that book. Let me just look this up very, very quickly.
Yeah, sure thing.
100 Questions for Eastern Catholics. Wait a minute. Am I making a mistake here? I promise you, this the title. Oh, okay. Yeah, 101 Questions and Answers on Eastern Catholic Churches by Edward Falk. This is a very good book if people want to read. Yeah, technically it's for all Eastern Catholic churches, but really this is just about Byzantine Catholics. I'm sorry about the I don't know why he took this title, but if other Eastern Catholics are like, dude, he's not talking about us at all, then I apologize. But this is a good book. Another book is it's a book written by the Melkites. It's called I think yeah, I don't know if it's
Are you discussing is the courage to be yourself? Or
well, the courage to be ourselves is a pastoral letter, so I don't really count that as a book. But I know there's like an actual book that was written by some Ukrainian deacon about Latinization and Vatican II, something about like that. I'm gonna find this. Give me 1 second. Ukrainian Catholic book on Latinization. Let's see. Yes. It's called yeah, I found it. The Face of God. This book is written by Archbishop Joseph M. Raya. And it basically dives deep into the spirit of Eastern Christianity and about like Trinity and stuff like that. But I recommend you guys reading it. Yeah, it's called The Face of God and Essays on Byzantine Spirituality. That's a very good book to read too. Of course, we have our own catechisms that we primarily use. We don't actually use the Roman Catholic catechism to catechize our catechumens. We use primarily in America too, Light of Life, I believe that's one, and then there's the Ukrainian catechism that is just published by the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. Yeah, we have our own Horologion, Anthologion, which are just, books that include our hymns and office, daily office, office of the hours. Also, different feast days, the liturgical calendar, different prayers. I mean, the list goes on and on. But if you guys want to dive deep into our tradition, there's a lot of material out there you can read. And a lot of them, yes, are Orthodox, but there's nothing wrong with it because we've always had them and we carry them with us when we came back into communion with Rome. And Rome said, you know what, they're perfectly Catholic, so keep them, which that applies to certain things that make people rather upset, including some of the saints on our calendar. But it is what it is. We've kept them ever since we came back, and we're probably going to continue to keep them.
Yeah, I already have a couple questions, people asking about that, but I'm saving that for a moment. So we have 2 last questions here, and then we'll go over to Q&A. First one I have for you is, what advice would you give to someone who is curious about exploring or even converting to Byzantine Catholicism?
First of all, if you're a Roman Catholic, try to stick with your church as much as you can. Because the last thing we want for the Byzantine Catholic Church to become is a haven for dissatisfied Roman Catholics who don't want to put up a fight, unfortunately. If you're just like, the Novus Ordo sucks and I just want to become Byzantine Catholic because I don't have a FSSP parish to go to near me. If you really are like between this and apostatizing, yes, sure, come to our church. But like, I want you to really think hard, right? Which is, that's not a valid reason. Just like you don't become a priest because you hate women so much.
Yeah.
You must love being a priest so much so that you're willing to give up having a wife.
Definitely. And for my final question for you before we go into Q&A, what do you want to see most in the future of Byzantine Catholicism?
I want to see I want Byzantine Catholics to stop being so like recluse, to stop being so like, we have a joke for ourselves, right? We think we're the Jews of Catholicism in the sense that we don't evangelize, that we just like discourage people from converting, which some people might be like, you just did that. You just told Roman Catholics not to come to your church. I'm not saying that. I'm saying there are millions and millions of people that aren't already Catholic, that are our neighbors and friends and whatnot. They're perfectly fine to be evangelized by us. It's a fair game between us and the Latin Catholics. If it's an atheist, whichever he prefers, he becomes, right? But I wish we can engage more with others, not only just, the Orthodox and the Catholics, the other, rites of Catholics, but also, secular society, in showcasing our faith, in just opening up this huge box of treasure that is our tradition, and to show them that it is worthy to partake, to be a part of this tradition. Of course, it's not for everyone. If you like the TLM, if you like Novus Ordo, if you like, for all I know, you want to be an Armenian Catholic, go ahead, right? But I'm sure if we really put ourselves out there, a lot of people would want to be us. Including people that don't even know who we are and don't even know that we exist.
Definitely. Thank you for that so much, and it's been fun asking you. Now we're going to get in some Q&A, so buckle up. It's about to get spicy.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So first question we have is from Orpho Bro Andrew. He would like to know, should different Eastern Catholic churches have the liberty to determine the level of Latinization that they adopt?
No, frankly, I don't think so.
Oh, what would the reason be for that then?
I think the reason would be that they should not be Latinized at all whatsoever. Because once you give them an inch, they take it way too far. And this is going to get controversial, but I'm going to just say it. You let one particular individual bishop with the inclination of Latinizing his church to take a little bit of liberty, he then all of a sudden starts, making people kneel during stuff. He starts making people pray the rosary right before the divine liturgy. And then the next thing you know, in the next 20 years, because this guy goes on and lives for a while, he has so much liberty. He's turned the church into this weird Frankenstein of East and West mixed together, and it's neither the East nor the West, and nobody respects them. And they're just, that's not okay, right? With regard to how much Latinization is okay, how much Latinization is not okay, that should be determined by very smart people, very, very smart people, not just, some rando. When I say rando, I don't mean no disrespect, but just your average bishop probably shouldn't even have the right to say stuff like on this, to be honest.
Okay, thank you very much. We got another interesting question by Satasha. She wants to know, what is your opinion about allowing the ordination of married men to the priesthood, and do you see this to be superior to the Latin rite?
I don't think it's superior. No, in fact, I would say in a certain way it's inferior. Inferior in the sense that St. Paul has made it pretty clear that he wants people to be celibate if they can be celibate. So if you are a celibate priest, which in our tradition, you're most likely a monk, if that's the case. you're usually spiritually more mature and closer to God in a way than a married priest who has to worry about his children and his wife and blah, blah, blah. I mean, this is just a Bible. Go and read it, right? Nobody can deny this. However, I feel like the gift of celibacy is rather rare, and we should not maybe try and force it on everyone. However, at the same time, I don't necessarily see the Roman practice of mandating priestly celibacy to be something that is being forced on everyone. Because once again, today, nobody is having to be a priest. If you're a Latin priest today, you chose to be celibate. You're not forced to be celibate, is what I'm trying to say. No, I don't think married priests are superior to unmarried priests, to celibate priests. In fact, I would say it's the other way around. However, I do think married priests have a role to play in our tradition, and they have always played a role in our tradition, and it's been a pretty successful role. So I'm not going to mess with something that's not broken.
Okay, very fair and respectable approach. And here is a question from a good friend of mine, Alfredo. He wants to know, are Eastern liturgies done in vernacular or in Greek or some other tongues?
Mostly in the vernacular. Sometimes they'll do a liturgy in the ethnic language that this particular church or parish belongs to historically or, present. Like, for example, at the Melkite Church, it used to be the case that they would have Arabic liturgies. But Arabic is also a vernacular. It's the language that these Melkites, who are from Syria, Lebanon, and Palestine, speak in their vernacular. That's their vernacular tongue. So yeah, traditionally our liturgy has always been done in the vernacular. We've never really... Yes, we have an emphasis on liturgical languages like Greek and Slavonic, but it's not the same degree as the Latin Church treating Latin, which is a totally different story,
Definitely. And here is an actually very interesting question. So from our friend, Great Martyr, he would like to ask you, in your opinion, should the liturgy be entirely in vernacular, or should it be the other way around where they use Slavonic/Greek throughout? What are your thoughts?
Honestly, I have no opinion on this. I guess leave it to a vote of the parish, whatever they want. I'm fine with either way. If it's entirely English, then so be it. If it's mixed with Slavonic or Greek, so be it. I don't care, frankly.
Okay. And let me see what else we got here. Okay, we got one more from Lucas, and we're going to go to some of the questions that asked to be private. So Lucas Roberts wants to know, as someone who is completely Western, dad's family came from Wales, mom's from Germany, I feel like Roman Catholics going to Eastern Catholicism are LARPing. Should Westerners leave Eastern for the East? What are your thoughts?
You mean leave West for the East?
I think he means like leave Eastern like Catholicism for the East, as in if you were coming from Eastern Orthodoxy to like Catholicism.
Oh, absolutely not. Because if you were Eastern Orthodox, you decide to become Catholic, canonically speaking, and this is by canon law, your default church that you should get into is an Eastern Catholic Church. And the reason being, if you were catechized, baptized, chrismated, whatever, if you were received into the Orthodox Church and you've been a canonical, like, Orthodox Christian for a long time, or even just not a long time, but a while, your spirituality, your formation is Eastern. You are familiar with the East, despite of the fact that you're ethnically Western. So you might as well stick with your spirituality as you were trained and taught in, rather than, jump into another one and then having to pretty much readjust yourself and refamiliarize yourself with a different tradition. So yes, according to canon law of the Catholic Church, if you convert from Eastern Orthodoxy to Catholicism, you are automatically a Eastern Catholic, not a Roman Catholic.
All right, thank you very much. Now we're going to go to some of the private questions. These are just simply people who requested not to have their name share. Hopefully in the future it'd be okay with that, but for now, I understand. So first question we have in store is, hello, what are your thoughts on groups such as the SSPX? And do you guys have an equivalent of Archbishop Lefebvre, but for the East?
Okay, so SSPX. SSPX is in an irregular communion with Rome. What does that mean? I actually don't even know. I'm going to be honest. According to the Archdiocese of Puebla, they're a schismatic group. According to the Archdiocese of Kansas, I guess they're Catholic, just like everyone else. I actually don't know about that one, but as far as I've heard. Okay, so SSPX, I'm just going to say this. Unless they're explicitly, unless the Vatican says explicitly they're just normal Catholics, or unless the Vatican says explicitly they're absolutely schismatics, I'm going to not think about it. I'm going to just go with the most obvious answer, which is they have the faculty to hear my confession and witness my marriage, which doesn't matter anyway, because, I mean, I guess I could go there for confession once, but I'm definitely not getting married in a Latin church. I'm getting married in a Byzantine church, which leads to the interesting question of how do we have our own equivalent of SSPX? Yes, 100% we do, and they're the SSJK, the Society of St. Josephat, and these people are awful. And I very, very much so hate the fact that SSPX endorsed them and sort of helped them. I don't know about what's going on right now, but one of the reasons why a lot of Eastern Catholics, especially Byzantine Catholics, have a major problem with SSPX is frankly because the SSPX aided in the schism of SSJK from the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. So the SSJK are Sede Provisionists, they're a bunch of Sede Provisionists that wanted to keep the Latinization of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, and really didn't want the liturgy to be set in Ukrainian, and rather wanted to keep it in Slavonic, Old Church Slavonic, while also keeping Latin elements that had been unorganically introduced into the Byzantine rite. So they schismed and left the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, formed their own illegal seminary, and then a bunch of their seminarians were ordained to priesthood by SSPX bishops, unfortunately. But the SSJK has been excommunicated by the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. As I heard, the excommunication didn't actually fully go through because Vatican was like, yeah, no, chill out. We're not excommunicating them yet, at least. But I'm not sure. But for us, yeah, we have an SSPX equivalent, except they're worse than the actual SSPX, because the actual SSPX, at least in their belief, other than perhaps regarding the authority of the Pope and Vatican II, is entirely Latin and traditionally Latin. The SSJK wanted to mess with our tradition and our liturgy, which is something we really care about. So we're not a fan of them.
Nice. All right. So we have another question sort of on that line. I'm actually curious because I didn't think about this one myself, but the individual wants to know, what are Byzantine Catholics' overall thoughts about Vatican II? Was it an overall net positive or net negative for you guys?
For us, it was a total win. It was a massive W. I'm not going to lie. I know when I say this, a lot of traditional Latin Catholics get very upset with me. They'll be like, what do you mean the Vatican II was a total win? The church went into crisis afterwards, which it did, by the way. I'm not going to deny that. But it definitely, our church did not go into crisis after Vatican II. We experienced a total revitalization. We were able to sort of purify ourselves so much and actually return to our true apostolic tradition and have lots of our autonomy restored to us, and train our seminarians better, build better, more beautiful, more traditional churches. I mean, just if you look at it from any perspective, Vatican II was a good council for Eastern Catholics.
All right. Thank you very much. And next one we have in store. So, this is an interesting question. So I didn't think about this. This is actually a really good one. The individual wanted to know, in the case for a married priest, would the wife have to go to confession to her husband, or would she have to go to a different priest somewhere else for that?
She cannot confess to her husband. She needs to go somewhere else.
Okay, that's a really good one.
Yeah. And I don't think the children of the priest can go to him for confession either, if I'm not wrong.
All right, sounds good. Oh, here, this is a bit of a funny one. So an individual wants to know, weird question, but are there any inner Byzantine rite beefs between each other, i.e. Melkites versus Ruthenians or other groups like that?
I wouldn't say beef. Are there rivalries and jokes we make about each other? Yes, but it's not beef, right? At the end of the day, we're so small. We are on the same line, right? But beef wise, the Malchites are the ones that think they're the best. Which, let's be honest, they kind of are. I mean, like, I'm not a Malchite, I'm a Ruthenian, but I have to admit the Malchites held down to their tradition, and the best, and they also have the highest honor. They actually have a patriarch that can trace his succession all the way. He's the patriarch of Antioch. Even though he lives in Damascus, Syria, he could trace his lineage all the way to Peter, because Peter was the bishop of Antioch before he became the bishop of Rome, if you guys didn't know that. But yeah, all of the Ruthenians are kind of like the middle ground. We're kind of like the people that are like everyone's okay with, but we're also like inactive and not that big in numbers. We're also like, we also got a lot of heat for our newest translation of our missal, I guess you can call it. It's the service book. We call it the Teal Book of Terror. It's a green book. And a lot of people like to trash on us because sometimes people think the translations aren't that great in that book. So our liturgy is apparently filled with some bad translations in English. And then we all like to make fun of the Ukrainians because we think the Ukrainians, so out of all the Byzantine Catholic churches, the Ukrainian church, especially in the diaspora, I don't know about in the homeland, but in the diaspora, they're very, still to this day, Latinized. Sometimes they don't even chant their liturgy. They pray the rosary in an official church setting. They do Stations of Cross. They kneel during the Eucharistic prayer, or we call it the anaphora. I mean, just the list goes on. And also the Ukrainian churches experience a huge, I guess, resurgence, or I guess I wouldn't call it a resurgence, but just like a recent phenomenon of them becoming very nationalistic, which, I mean, I don't blame them. There's a country at war with them, they kind of, it is what it is, but I mean, it could get a bit cringe at times and people make fun of them for that. But overall, we're all friends. We all get along.
Definitely. And for our next question I have, this is a bit of a funny one, but they want to know, hello, Forever Risen. Love your post. I think you know who this is, but the individual wants to know, does it ever feel weird being an ethnic minority in different settings when visiting certain groups of the Byzantine Rite, and how do you personally deal with that? So I guess for me too, I experienced that myself. Like, I was the only Spanish guy going to Melkite one. It was all, like you said, Middle Eastern Arab people there.
Frankly, no. The reason why is you're never the only one. We all know what ethnicity the priest at that Arab church is, because I'm not going to dox him, but let's just say he is not Arab. He is absolutely not Arab, and he's not Caucasian white either. So, yeah. Guy has no connection, ethnically speaking, to the Arabs. My Ruthenian parish has so many Hispanics that you hear like half the people talking there after Mass, after Divine Liturgy in Spanish. I mean, yeah, they're supposed to be an Eastern European parish, but like, no, it's you're never the only one. We have a subdeacon at my Ruthenian parish who is African, sub-Saharan African. The guy is from, I don't know, where's he from? Ivory Coast or Benin? I don't even know. Like, you will never expect someone like that, right? But it's just like, we've gotten to this point where we have enough converts where regardless of where you go, you're not going to be the only one who's not like ethnic, you know?
All right, sounds good. And let me see what else. Okay. I'm hesitant to read this question, but I would go ahead and say full send. But someone wants to know, anonymously, may or may not be Eastern Orthodox.
Mm-hmm.
The question was, do you find it kind of strange how you have some of our saints in your church as icons? What are your thoughts on that, considering the Roman Rite doesn't acknowledge those?
No, I don't actually find that strange.
So, yeah, it's just a little jab, I guess, from your little East cousins over there.
I don't find that strange at all. I mean, we are free to venerate whoever we want to venerate, frankly. Our saints that we carry with us into the Roman, into the communion with Rome, they've just always been there, and they're just like, you know, maybe technically, like on a canonical level, you could say that these saints are not infallible, right? Like only saints canonized by the universal church as a whole, like this saint is accepted by every single church of the Roman Catholic churches, or I guess the Catholic churches, can be an infallible like canonization of a saint. It needs to be approved by the Curia and this and that. But at the end of the day, it's like we've always been allowed to have these saints, and we believe they are saints. And private veneration, local veneration of saints have always been a thing. So yeah, I don't find that strange at all. And I'm of the firm belief that people that are not in the visible communion of the Roman Church can be saints, can be saved. And that's the official belief of the Catholic Church as well. I mean, unless you're a Fainist, which I hope you're not, because that guy was excommunicated. Some people would argue he was excommunicated not because he said, not because of his own sort of wrong interpretation of outside of church there's no salvation, but rather because of his disobedience. But the church's understanding of who can be saved has, I think, rather been pretty clear. The fact we freaking canonized the Libyan martyrs, who are Coptic Orthodox Christians, to be our saints in the Roman Catholic Church, speaks volume to that. So yeah, I don't have a question at all with having Eastern Orthodox Christians who died outside of communion with Rome to be saints. I personally have multiple icons of non-Catholic saints.
All right. And this is our last anonymous question, and then I'll go ahead and show you some of my own personal questions that I didn't mention earlier. This one wants to know, who is your most despised heretic in Christian history, and who is your most favorite saint? Thank you.
My most despised heretic.
You better be, well, me personally, that's Luther, but that's a whole different conversation.
Most despised heretic. Oh man,
would it be like an early church father one, maybe?
I really don't want to upset anyone, so I'm gonna
boo. What is it?
You want me to just say it?
Yeah, sure.
I don't like Calvin. I really don't like him. I find him very annoying. And I think he ruined Christianity to a degree, John Calvin. But no, my favorite church father, tough one. There's a lot of them. There's so many of them, actually. Man, you really put me on a hard spot, because like I don't know who to pick. You know what I mean? maybe St. John Chrysostom. Yeah,
that's a good one.
But no, I'm gonna just say it. I think John Calvin is a heretic, and I think his legacy is not only felt throughout Protestant denominations. Of many, by the way, don't vibe with him. Frankly, Lutherans don't really vibe with Calvin. I mean, I'm not going to call them heretic. I don't think they will, at least. I mean, maybe some Lutherans will, but Reformed theology and its consequences on even Catholics
have been a disaster.
It's been a disaster for Christendom. It really has been. Counter-Reformation was obviously needed, but I'd rather that the Reformation never... Look, Protestants were right into pointing out the abusive practices of the Catholic Church, but their schism and heresy were not justified. And because of that, we had to launch our own Counter-Reformation and
Council of Trent
and all that. And they were all great. They saved the church. Well, the church was always going to be saved. But some of the fruits of Calvinism still influence even people within Catholicism. And its impact was being felt like hundreds of years later, after the demise or the official denouncing of Calvinism by the Catholic Church. Here we're talking about, the Jansenists. We're talking about I can go on and on about this, but I don't want to get too sidetracked. I don't like him. Not at all.
No, it's definitely understandable, but those are all of our questions, and now I guess it's just me being less interview mode and just talking. So some of my personal questions to you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say we'll go about 10 more minutes and I'll wrap up. But something I always wanted to ask you, and I was curious your thoughts on, do you ever find Gregory Palamas and like the teachings of Aquinas to be a bit conflicting at times? Because that's one thing I always struggled with really Eastern Catholicism.
Yes. Once again, I don't 100% agree with Aquinas, and I don't 100% agree with Palamas. Do I hold to some form of distinction of, I guess if you want to hold it into Eastern Orthodox language, the essence and energy of God? Yes, but how far can I go with that? We're at the most a formal distinction. If I were to affirm a real distinction between the energy and essence of God, I don't think I can, because I think that's heretical. I think that's rendering God into a composite, which is in direct contradiction to divine simplicity, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is a dogma of the Catholic Church. But does that mean I can't hold to a formal distinction, like the one formulated by Blessed Duns Scotus? No. But formal distinction is not the same as visual distinction, which is the one formulated by Thomas Aquinas. And I don't agree to visual distinction formulated by Thomas Aquinas.
Yeah, I get that. And I feel like at times, too, you do see, especially for the medieval, so Scotism versus Thomism, there's always been more indoor baseball talk for that stuff. And that's a whole different podcast and conversation. But I get what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. And the Synod of Jerusalem, which is a synod of orthodoxy, but this is a synod that the Melchites, or back then they were the Antiochian Orthodox, participated in prior to them coming back into communion with Rome. The Synod of Dosidius, as a response to Calvinism, overlaid or came out with a message, I believe, in Decree 3. I don't know which decree, in the Confession of Dosidius, where it gave a pretty on-Thomist, not under response to the question of free will and predestination, and it was universally accepted by all the Orthodox churches at that time. The Synod of Jerusalem and its result, the Confession of Dosidius. That if I were to faithfully read my own liturgical and theological tradition without stepping outside of the boundary of Catholicism, I cannot be a Thomist in my understanding of predestination and free will, because the Confession of Dosidius. Okay, sorry, this is a stupid name, but its view on predestination and free will is 100% compatible with Catholic view. It's not heretical, but it's not compatible with the Thomistic understanding of predestination and free will.
I'm honestly surprised that you're allowed to or able to hold on to a lot of Western theologians such as Aquinas and stuff while being Eastern Catholic, because
bit
of a personal story for me. I think I told you this before privately, but there was a time where I was deeply invested and even considering becoming Byzantine Catholic, just where I only go there. And I had to sit down with the priest, and he told me very candidly and honestly, after months of me being there, that if you could see yourself being part of any other rite besides Byzantine Catholicism, then Byzantine Catholicism isn't for you.
Yeah.
And I respected him for saying that, because he wasn't saying, like, I don't want you here. He was just saying, like, hey, I just want to let you know, if you join this, you have to go full in. You can't go like halfway where you're dipping your toes into West and East, which is something I respect. And especially when I asked him questions about, Aquinas, Don Scotus, he's very much like, I don't really care much about those guys because we have our own thinkers. I'm more concerned about them and their teachings.
Oh, yeah.
And he wasn't saying that in a disrespectful way, like that these people were wrong. It was just his personal opinion.
100%. Yeah, 100%. But, me, someone who's constantly around Roman Catholics and engaged in dialogues with Roman Catholics, I have to know this kind of stuff, right? I can't be pulling up to, a talk of a Catholic theologian. By Catholic, I mean like a Latin Catholic theologian at a university forum, and he starts talking about Thomism, and I have like no clue what he's talking about. Like, I just can't do that, right? And I have a degree in philosophy, which is why I had to read a lot of Thomas Aquinas and Aristotle and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I personally, it's not like Aquinas is completely contradictory to the thoughts of the East. The East is not anti-scholasticism. That's something that people I think tend to not understand. Is like a lot of people, especially when they're like catechumens, they'll come to be a Byzantine Catholic or a Eastern Orthodox catechumen, and what they'll do is, and they'll come in, I'll be like, oh, so the East, we don't believe in original sin. Also, everything is a forgery. Also, the scholasticism is of Satan. And also, if you pray the rosary, you're just inviting the demonic spirit to come upon you. Absolutely not the case. Nobody thinks this way. Not anyone serious.
And you guys you don't have rosaries, but you have like prayer ropes. Is that really just a priestly thing, or do you ever see like laity use prayer ropes?
Yeah, we use prayer ropes.
Really? Do you have one by chance? Yeah. Oh, nice. Often do you like use it though? Is it like a daily devotion like the rosary, or not really?
It was a daily devotion for me until I got lazy, basically.
No.
But yeah, we have our own quote rosary called the Rule of Theotokos. It's a very different rosary from the Latin rosary. It's a very, very Marian rosary. I mean, even in the West, you have different rosaries. You have the Carmelite rosary, the Franciscan rosary, I believe, and whatever. But I will tell you for sure, it's not the same rosary. It's very different.
I get what you're saying. Hey, really quick, do you have any last closing comments at all for the audience, or anything you'd like people to know before you go?
I guess I don't want to drag it on for too long, but I do want to say, come and sort of check us out and talk to us. We have a lot to show, really. If you're going to be at the Eucharistic Congress, come to one of our liturgies in Indianapolis at St. Athanasius. That church is a great place to be, except they're in a bit of financial trouble. So it could really use some help of just visitors, maybe some donation, whatever. It's St. Athanasius Byzantine Catholic Church in Indianapolis. And I want to close this out with, let's see, this quote from, which pope is this? From St. John Paul II. So in his apostolic letter Orientale Lumen, he said, quote, I believe that one important way to grow in mutual understanding and unity consists precisely in improving our knowledge of one another. The children of the Catholic Church already know the ways indicated by the Holy See for achieving this, namely, to know the liturgy of the Eastern churches. So, yes, come and check our liturgy and learn about it if you would like to. It's full of treasure, I would say, yes.
Definitely. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on my show, and you're more than welcome back anytime you want. And in the future, maybe we could do more chill, relaxed version, sort of more interview one, but it was fun getting a good old Byzantine 101 in.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, thanks again. This has been our episode of Requiem Radio. I'll see you in the flip side. Take care.